There's a hidden danger in the current government shutdown about which few people are aware. Most warnings about the shutdown are centered on closure of federal facilities and grounds. But because of the way spending resolutions are passed, they can hide the way money is spent. That means it is harder to find waste and fraud in government. Less transparency means the public does not get to keep an eye on how money is spent. Without such accountability, the public is kept in the dark about the funding of many programs. Even under the best of conditions, much of the budget is difficult or impossible to understand. This current shutdown could have electoral consequences as tempers are raging in the nation's capital. The public, too, is highly divided over the president's health care law, which is at the center of the budget controversy. Tea Party Republicans are heavily in favor of delaying or repealing Obamacare. Democrats are opposed to any such measure. With neither side willing to negotiate, the shutdown could extend for a while. It could even break the previous record of 21 days set in 1996. Our guest today is Derek Crow. He's the communications officer of the National Priorities Project. That group has been in existence for 30 years, promoting transparency in government. Crow's here to talk to us today about some of the ways spending resolutions make government less transparent. We'll also be discussing the causes and possible future of the current government shutdown. Welcome to the program, Derek.
Thanks, glad to be here.
Derek, what could have been done to prevent a shutdown?
Well, at its base, what we're pushing for at the National Priorities Project is a return to a regular budgeting process. You know, in the run-up to the shutdown, we saw a number of rushed continuing resolutions try to be shoved through because at its base, Congress hasn't done its job. The regular budgeting process and the regular appropriations process takes all year, and it has bills introduced in various subcommittees and committees, and they work their way through a regular process that takes some time, and eventually you get 12 appropriations bills that get passed, and that funds the government. Now, Congress has gotten a little distracted. I mean, you've seen them waste a lot of time this year on renaming bridges in St. Louis, air traffic control towers. They resized the commemorative coins at the Baseball Hall of Fame, but they didn't do their basic job, which was to fund the people's business. And what you saw instead was grandstanding. You saw them get distracted by a number of scandals and investigations. And then you saw them at the very last minute try to cram this continuing resolution that just essentially is saying, oh, we're just going to fund it at last year's levels. And then they tried to attach a Christmas tree of political demands to that. Now, had they not done that, had they taken their responsibility seriously, not only would we not be in a government shutdown, but we would have been in a position where we as citizens could weigh in and make sure they're spending that money in line with our priorities.
Now, why are the sides so unwilling to negotiate?
Well, I mean, there's an intense disagreement over philosophies of government. I mean, there's a variety of things. For one, I think at its core, you put your finger on it, there's a real divide in opinion about whether or not the Affordable Care Act, which was passed by Congress, signed by the president a while ago, should be allowed to move forward. Now, the ironic thing is, because we've gotten to this point where the government shut down, that's not actually delaying the implementation of what's called Obamacare. What's happening right now is you're seeing a lot of things like parks getting shut down, the CDC becoming less efficient, interference in DOJ responsibilities, all these things, and not to mention 800,000 federal workers being furloughed. So you've got a danger to real damage to the economy, real damage to the safety nets, and real damage to the services that we all rely on here in the United States.
I want to ask you about the continuing resolutions, but what do you say to the American people who are just so fed up? They're like, you know what, let the government shut down. It does more damage when it's open. What do you say to those people?
Well, to those folks, I would say it's never a good idea to furlough 800,000 people at once. Like, regardless of your philosophy of government or what you want your government to be doing, you never want to jack up the unemployment rate or the temporary unemployment rate, whatever you want to call it, by that much for however long. And there's even talk that those 800,000 people who up until this point yesterday were expecting paychecks, there's talk that they may not get paychecks for the time that they're furloughed. So you've not only got a lot of people suddenly without anything to do during the day, but they may not get paid for the time that they're going to miss. And that's a huge disruption to the economy, not to mention the services that those folks provide while they're being employed.
So 800,000 people not getting paid, suddenly they have rents to pay, they have car payments to pay, they have mortgages, they have utilities and these types of things. Suddenly those bills don't get paid.
Absolutely. And regardless of your philosophy of government, whether you're a small government conservative or you have a more expansive view of the role of government from a progressive side, You want your government to be responsive to you when you have a chance to express your priorities. And the process we saw Congress go through was opaque, irregular, and rushed. And it kept us from being able to properly express ourselves. And it makes it hard for organizations like us at National Priorities Project to be able to educate people about when those contact points are available when Congress is running through this completely irregular process.
Now let's go back to the continuing resolutions, and I also want to talk to you about who's still getting paid, because you said 800,000 people are not going to get paid, but I want to talk about who they are. But what are the continuing resolutions, and how are they used to fund government?
Well, continuing resolution is essentially my dog ate my homework. I'm just going to sign the homework I did last year and turn it in. So a continuing resolution just says we're going to keep the government open essentially at last year's level. And what you've seen Congress try to do, and one of the reasons we're having trouble with this shutdown is they're trying to use the shutdown as a bargaining chip to cram other things through, like defunding Obamacare or contraceptive restrictions or things like that that the House has tried to attach. And why that's bad is essentially you don't have any, like, if you've been trying to influence the appropriations bills that have kind of started creaking their way through the process, suddenly all your input gets wiped out when this continuing resolution shows up in place of an actual appropriations bill.
Now let's talk about who's still getting paid through this shutdown and who's most affected. Let me also throw in there, is the NSA still going to be spying on Americans?
Yes, unfortunately. So what you find in a situation like this, the government has to produce a plan, and they have to deem certain people essential and then non-essential. The essential functions of government includes, according to the administration, military and national defense purposes, and within that, the NSA is still going to be spying on Americans. Now, Congress is still getting paid, ironically enough, while they're furloughing all these folks. The Constitution actually prevents Congress from not getting paid, which is a very convenient fallback for them. A lot of their staff aren't going to get paid, and a lot of the agencies that they oversee are going to be furloughed. So you're going to have each individual agency kind of deciding who is absolutely essential to keeping the government running and who's not.
Derek, I want to talk to you more about when the last time a full budget was passed, but we do have to take a quick break. We're talking with Derek Crow right here on WHDT World News.